want to take this time to discuss something that I've kind of touched upon in the past in several other videos, but I really haven't addressed it explicitly as a cross-cultural pop culture phenomenon, and that's the idea of mass infantilization of our pop culture offerings. Now, to give you kind of an idea of exactly what I'm talking about here, there's two tremendous books on the specific idea of media being dumbed down and basically being turned into juvenile fare, targeting mostly adult audiences. The first book is called Consume by Benjamin Barber. I believe it came out in 2007. It's absolutely fantastic. And the other one is called The Dumbest Generation by Mark Bauerlein. I want to say this one came out in 2009, but I could be wrong. Anyway, both these films kind of touched upon the same issue, and that's the fact that our current mass media offerings, although explicitly targeting the 18 to 34 adult demographic, are actually kind of being dumbed down and ratcheted down to be very juvenile fare. And basically what I mean by that is the actual content of the films and television that we're watching today, despite maybe having some adult thematics, as far as actual content and commentary and social cultural criticism going on in these films, there's really not a whole lot. In fact, they're actually kind of being made on the same comprehensive level that a 6 or 7 year old would get. Now, to give you an idea of what's going on, if you look at this year's slate of summer movies, perhaps sort of the unifying theme you're picking up on here is that they're not exactly the most intellectual offerings. I mean, you got the Avengers, you got Jurassic Park, you got Ant-Man, you got the Terminator, you got Mad Max, you got all these movies that, quite frankly, are pretty stupid. I mean, there might be good movies in various shades, use genre standards as a typical measuring stick. But overall, these films, they're not exactly meant to comment on the human condition. I mean, we're not really dealing with the work of Kobayashi or the work of Kurosawa or the work of Bergman here, where these films are actually commenting on a certain truth of the human existence. These are films that are basically just loud explosions and car chases and robots and CGI effects, and basically plots that are hardly any more refined or sophisticated than the average Saturday morning cartoon, despite the prevalence of swear words and nudity and extreme gore. The fact of the matter is, once you strip away all these things, basically what we're working with is basically your average comic book story that any, second or third grader in America can comprehend. Now, here's what you're probably thinking. Now, why should I care? Why is that a bad thing? If I enjoy things like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, or Harry Potter, then what difference does it make? Well, I guess the difference is it doesn't really matter if you have a diversified palette of consumer offerings. The fact of the matter is, we're not getting that diversified plate. We're not getting the counterbalance to the Avengers. The fact of the matter is, these movies are making so much money. You take a look at the last Fast and Furious film, the movie made over $1 billion. The Avengers is probably going to make in excess of $2 billion this year. Star Wars is going to make $2 billion plus. So these things, they're obvious cash cows. There's a lot of money being pumped into their marketing. There's a lot of money going into them, and basically these marketers, your Disney types, I mean, they really want this to connect with the 18 to 34 demographic. Now, the problem with these films are, because they're so successful and because they cost so much money, that the mainstream distributors are actually making fewer films that, number one, are original, and certainly fewer films that are actually kind of on an adult wavelength. And I think you're seeing sort of a reactionary trend going on now. And there's one film in particular I think kind of speaks to perhaps a growing discontent with this infantile pop culture. We'll get to that in just a moment. So anyway, basically what we're kind of dealing with is, because films like the Avengers and Star Wars and Fast and Furious and Mad Max and all these films are making so much money, and because obviously we have the problem of pirating and other digital forms of film thievery going on, Film distributors are not really going to make anything less than a sure bet at the box office. If they're going to spend $50 million, it's going to be on something that's a proven property. If it's not an outright remake or sequel, it's going to be something that's clearly inspired by some pre-existing framework. And because you have so much reliance on that as a commodity, we're certainly seeing less experimental films. And we're certainly seeing less films that are in tune with reality. And in fact, it seems like the films that are most in tune with the actual reality we all live and experience, the living, breathing world, the adult world, these films, they're kind of being relegated off to, indie films and art house theaters and places where you really can't find them. I mean, you're not going to find a film by Harmony Korine playing at your local 18-movie Cineplex. You're not going to be seeing the work of Lars von Trier. How do you feel about him? I mean, he's definitely making films that are different. You're not going to see the work of guys like Gaspar Noé going on at your big-budget Hollywood movies theaterplex. And the problem with that is, really, that's kind of the only way most people experience films. I mean, yeah, we do have Netflix, we do have all these digital downloads, but as far as it being a competitive industry, you know what, you've got really limited choices. I mean, you do maybe have some art house theaters, in some of the major cities, but by and large, if you're growing up in a small town in America, you got one theater, and whatever the big Hollywood Leviathan is pooping out that week, that's what you got to deal with. So like I said, your options are limited, and they're limited by choice. Because the film studios don't want to put anything out there, some sure bet, so they go with what works, which are really dumb, lowbrow, generic comedies, and 22 Jump Street and the like. The superhero movies, the big budget fantasy films, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, all these movies, and the really dumb action vehicles, Fast and Furious, Mad Max, all that stuff. Now, here's the problem. Like I said earlier, because these Hollywood film studios are putting so many of these movies out, they can't bankroll, or they refuse to bankroll films that are smaller budget, that are more sensitive, and that are more intelligent. Now, you look at around your theater during the award season, late fall, yeah, you're going to see some good stuff. I mean, I'm not going to say there hasn't been some very good big budget films I thought were actually legitimately great that came out over the last day. I thought Silver Linings Playbook was excellent. I thought The Wolf of Wall Street was excellent. I mean, there are plenty of other movies out there that kind of fall in that same genre. But by and large, when you look at the absolute best of the best that are being made, I think in the year 2010, movies like a Serbian film, Restrepo, The Unknown Known, all these great documentaries, The Act of Killing, all these movies, you're not going to see them playing side by side with Batman and Superman. You're going to see them playing side by side with, I don't know, what else is going on, Wonder Woman or Jurassic Park. And as I've said so many times throughout this video and all these other videos, it would not be a problem if we had that option of seeing more diversified, intelligent adult material. The thing is, we're just not getting it, even on television. You look at HBO, and that's supposed to be like the big catalyst for adult entertainment, right? Because, you've got Game of Thrones, you got girls, you got all this stuff. The fact of the matter is, yeah, they may have adult content, but, thematically, they're not really covering anything that I think is really pressing on a socio-political spectrum. These are shows that are basically kind of giving us basically the same reductionistic, bored hero versus villain, good versus evil, with some moralistic qualms thrown in to make it seem a little bit more complicated than it actually is. But these things, they're just not really working on a level that's deeper than pretty much what we're used to seeing on network television or in the mainstream films. So the problem with this, it's kind of twofold. Obviously, if we're only going to get movies like Frozen and Pixels and Minions, obviously this is not going to give us a lot of room to make great art of our own. I mean, if we're going to grow up with this as being our only exposure to the film medium, then I guess it kind of stands to reason that in the future, instead of getting really good, solid, thought-provoking fare like The Deer Hunter or Annie Hall or Kramer vs. Kramer, all these movies that were actually big-budget, box-office Hollywood hits 35, 40 years ago, we're just not going to get that anymore. It's not going to be feasible. Nobody's going to pay to see it. Studios aren't going to bankroll them. Even some of the smaller independent film studios aren't going to, put the money behind them, which is a shame because, there are so many great independent works going on out there. But because you're not able to make money off of it, the problem there is pretty obvious. Even if you are making great independent art, you're not making enough money to support it. You're going to have to go into something else. You're just not going to be in there because it's not really a financially feasible platform anymore. And that's directly tied to the fact that we've got all the money going into Jurassic World and all the Disney Pixar stuff. As good as it may be, the fact of the matter is it's not really adult, complicated, refined fare. And longitudinally, the problem there, I think, is, if this is our artwork, if this is our reflection of the world around us, and art I define as being something that exposes an empirical truth or beauty about the world around us, our movies aren't doing that. They're not really striving for any sort of socio-political underpinnings. They're not really trying to explore anything in depth about the human condition. They're not really exposing us to uncomfortable truth, which is really what the best art does. It exposes to things we don't want to see. We're just kind of getting a really stupid, reductionistic, immature, childish reflection of the world around us. You know what? You may like Star Wars, you may Lord of the Rings, but the fact of the matter is they're just really infantile. They're not really saying anything grand about the world around us. They're just kind of giving us entertainment and CGI and really reductionistic heroes and villains and plot lines that are really nothing more advanced than what we'll see out of, a Brothers Grimm fairy tale. But like I said, I think there is perhaps a reactionary movement going on. I think we're probably kind of getting tired of all this stuff. We're sick of seeing these really derivative comic book superhero films and these really dumb animated movies and these stupid, irreverent sex comedies, which really aren't funny anymore anyway. And I think the prime example of that is a film that came out last year called American Sniper. Now, American Sniper was a relatively low budget for a big budget, milieu, office, Hollywood complex film. Which is kind of sad to think when you say a movie costs $35 million, it's low budget. Kind of show you how bad we've gotten in the medium. But anyways, a film directed by Clint Eastwood, and it's a movie that, despite a relatively low budget, ended up making like $500 million at the box office. And it was a huge surprise hit, and everyone was offended by it because, it's the story of, the sniper in Iraq and Afghanistan. But the thing is, and people said it was anti-Muslim, and there's a big, bunch of rhetoric about it, about being sexist and trigger warnings and some of their nonsense. But the fact of the matter is, this movie was controversial and successful, I think, for the exact same reason. And that's because, unlike all these other movies that are being crammed down our throats, it actually thrust us back into reality. It was a movie that kind of gave us a real-world setting, a real-world hero, a real-world villain. In fact, depending on the perspective of the movie, the same character. And it took us out of the comfort zone. It took us out of the morally clear, black and white superhero world we all know and love. Instead of giving us the promise that some grandiose superhero is going to come and save us, we're in a state of, constant peril, but survivable peril. This is a movie that kind of brought us back into the real world. It told us that we are mortal despite our failings, despite our own delusions of grandeur. We still can die. Bad things can happen to good people. Good things can happen to bad people. And in the day, we just don't have that much control over our own existences. There's a lot of brutal truths that I think today's audiences really, frankly, want to see more of. Because, we don't want to see the same old tried and true stuff anymore. Batman, Superman's fun. Frozen and Beauty and the Beast, all that's fun. Harry Potter, it's fun. But at the end of the day, we're still human beings in a real world. I don't think our art has gotten anywhere close to touching upon some of the really nuanced socio-cultural issues of our day. All these things going on with race relations, all things going on with the militarization of the police, all these things going on with LGBT identity, all these things going on really with socioeconomic status. The fact of the matter is we're still living in a post-recession society, but we don't have any great post-recession films. None of these films comment on what it's like to actually be out there in the world today, to be striving, to be saddled with student loan debt. Instead, we're just kind of getting, once again, the formulaic. We're getting the tried and true, we're getting the Disney movies, we're getting Star Wars and Jurassic Park and Spider-Man. As much as we may enjoy them, the fact of the matter is we're not really commenting on anything deeper about what we're all experiencing. And ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what great art does. It's a reflection of who we are as a culture. And, if you look at Age of Ultron, Pitch Perfect 2, and all these other films, they're not reflecting who we are. They're giving us this really sort of stupid, reductionistic, really crude, elitist perspective of our society and telling us that that's what we want as consumers, when I think clearly we don't. notice all this stuff about infantile pop culture and why it's happening. Obviously, it's because it's making a lot of money. It's because we're kind of being conditioned to accept really underwhelming childish fare as being acceptable. And I think it's okay to go out and watch it, but the fact of the matter is you also have to kind of do something to negate it as well. So that means for every time I think you should go out and you watch a Harry Potter movie or Lord of the Rings or Jurassic Park or whatever, I think it's only fitting that you go out and you go to an art house studio and you watch something. Something perhaps you wouldn't normally watch. Something that's maybe a foreign film, something that's independent, some NC-17. And just because something's rated NC-17 doesn't mean it's, necessarily ribald. Usually it just means it's really intelligent and people don't want to watch you to see it because it'll get you thinking about things. And if you think about things, you won't go see Hollywood movies anymore. So go out. There's a lot of movies coming up this summer I think are going to be really fantastic that are from the independent, more mature perspective. The Look of Silence was a fantastic documentary coming out, which looks terrific. You got Gaspar Noé's Love coming out, which looks to be absolutely revolutionary. So many great movies come out so far this year already. Lots of holdovers from 2013, no matter what genre you're into. The fact of the matter is just get out there and explore, sort of expand your palette. Try the indie movies, try the foreign films, try the films that are a little bit outside the box, and I think you'll be ultimately rewarded. Because at the end of the day, even if you're still watching films like The Avengers and Jurassic World and all this other stuff, as long as you're also experiencing more mature fare that's actually commenting on your own experiences and being a reflection of the world around us, that makes you not only a more well-rounded consumer, I think it kind of makes you a more well-rounded individual. It kind of expands your horizon. It makes you think outside the box and gives you different perspectives to look at things. I mean, I can't really imagine where I would be perspective-wise if I didn't grow up watching films by Kurosawa or Bergman to go along with, RoboCop and Terminator 2. As much as those films are great, they're not really the best examples of motion pictures commenting on the empirical world around us. As good as they are, though, I think they're great movies, but there are films that I think are better reflections of human existence, like The Human Condition by Kobayashi, or Showa, the great 1985 documentary, or what's another good one? Rashomon, Seven Samurai. All these movies, great reflections. The work of Fellini. All these things that perhaps you haven't seen before, maybe you should go out and see to kind of at least use a counterbalance for the pop culture zeitgeist. So anyway, all that to kind of say, there's a lot of juvenile stuff going on, and as long as you keep buying it, they're going to keep making it. So my solution, or at least my plea to you as a fan of independent, mature art, is give the other stuff a try. Just go out there, give it a sample. Still watch The Avengers, still watch Harry Potter, but at the end of the day, I want you to go out there and try something different and expand your oeuvre and give independent art a shot. And then maybe, once you do that, maybe you'll find your tastes have changed. Maybe you don't want Star Wars anymore. Maybe you want something a little bit more intellectual, something a little bit more challenging, and something that you can actually relate to and look into and see a part of yourself. Because at the end of the day, not only does the future